Remember, God sent Isaiah to Ahaz because Ahaz was afraid that he, along with every male in the household of David, was going to be murdered. They were going to be wiped out, which would mean that the Davidic throne or the Davidic dynasty would cease to exist. But God had made a promise to David. David wanted to build a house for God. David was a man after God's own heart. And he wanted to build a temple, and God came to him and says, I recognize what you want to do, but you're a man of blood. So you're not going to. And he says, what's going to happen? But he says this, I love your heart, David. So he makes a promise to David. It's actually a unilateral covenant with David, which means it's not based on anything that David or his descendants have to do. It's only a promise made by God. Whether or not you live up to it or not doesn't matter. God made this promise and it's going to happen. That's what a unilateral covenant is. We refer to it as the Davidic Covenant. How many of you, grown up in church all your life, heard it as the Davidic Covenant? Well, this is what we're referring to as the Davidic Covenant. God made a promise. How many of you know what that promise was? Not a trick question. Sometimes I ask trick questions. Not a trick question. God made a promise that one of his descendants would rule over God's kingdom on this earth for all eternity. You'll find this promise recorded in several places in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse number 12 through 16, and 1 Chronicles chapter 7, verses 11 through 14, and Psalms chapter 89, verses 3 and 4, etc. You can go on. There's other places it's referenced. But let's just read one. This is 1 Chronicles chapter 7, verses 11 through 14. Nathan, you got to remember, David wanted to build this temple. Nathan thought it was a great idea. He goes to God. God says it's a great idea, but. So Nathan has to come back and tell David. And if you remember, Nathan is the prophet that's always talking with David. When he has the problem with Bathsheba, oh yeah. Nathan's the one that goes to get him. Well, this is Nathan talking to David, and Nathan is a prophet. And this is what God says through Nathan to David. For when you die, talking to David, and you join your ancestors in the grave, I will raise up one of your descendants, one of your sons, and I will make his kingdom strong. He is the one who will build a house, a temple for me. Now, at first glance, that looks like Solomon. Doesn't it? So Solomon is a type of the Messiah. But he's not the one that Nathan's talking about. How do we know that? Well, let's keep reading. And I will secure his throne forever. Was Solomon's throne secured forever? Let's keep going. I will be his father and he will be my son. Now we've got familial relationships here. God is saying through Nathan, I'll be this guy's father. He'll be my son. I will never take my favor from him as I took it from the one who ruled before you, Saul. I will confirm him as king over my house and my kingdom for all time. His throne will be established forever. Who is this ruler? Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David. Luke sums up the Davidic kingdom in his gospel. Luke chapter 1, verses 32 and 33. Notice what he says. He will be very great, and he will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his ancestor David, and he will reign over Israel forever. His kingdom will never end. People, that's the Davidic covenant in a nutshell. Now, let's get back to the story in Isaiah chapter 7. Ahaz was all worried that Rezin and Pekah were going to murder him and the entire royal family, and that would put an end to the hope of the Messiah. That would put an end to the promise that God had made to David. Because the Messiah had to be from the lineage of David according to the Davidic covenant. And God tells Ahaz, stop worrying. It ain't ever going to happen, as we say in Cherokee County. And just to assure you that it ain't ever going to happen, I'll give you a sign. I'll do some type of miracle, Ahaz, as a sign to you that it ain't ever going to happen. It can be a sign on the earth itself, or it can be a sign in heaven. You tell me what you want to see. You just ask, and I'll perform it to prove to you that the promise I made to David will be fulfilled. Look at verses 10 through 12. We're still in Isaiah chapter 7. Notice what it says. Later the Lord sent this message to King Ahaz. Ask the Lord your God for a sign of confirmation. Ahaz, make it as difficult as you want, as high as heaven. You want the earth to, or you want the sun to stop for 24 hours? You just ask me. I'll make the sun stop. You want the sun to go backwards 10 degrees? You just ask. I'll make that happen. You want asteroids to fall from the sky? Just tell me. God says, I'll make it happen. And then he goes further. Or as deep as the place of the dead. You want the ground to open up and swallow people like the sons of Korah. You want an earthquake to happen and half of the city is completely destroyed and right down the middle of the road the other half is not? Just ask me. But the king refused. No, he said, I will not test the Lord like that. Now you got to remember in the Pentateuch it says we're not to tempt the Lord by asking for a sign. An evil generation does that. But this is different. This isn't unbelief. This is God telling you. He's saying, you ask a sign. It's not you coming and saying, God, I need a sign. No. God is saying this. So this angers the Lord because Ahab didn't refuse out of respect for the Lord. No. He refused out of a false piety. The truth is, it didn't matter whether God was going to give him a sign or didn't give him a sign. It wouldn't matter how great the sign was. Ahaz's mind was made up. He was an evil king. He wasn't going to serve the Lord. He was going to serve his own purposes. And he'd already figured out how he was going to get out of this on his own. Yeah. And the Lord realizes, you're too stupid. I'm being snarky. To ask for a sign and put your trust in me. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to give the people a sign. Because we're talking about the house of David. The question is, can you stop God's promises? He made a covenant with David. Will anything stop it? I was going to give a sign so the people would know that nothing can stop it. But you know what? You don't want a sign? Fine. I'll give you my own sign. And this sign will not only confirm that my promise to David will be fulfilled. In other words, it will not only confirm that the Davidic covenant will be fulfilled, but it will also reveal the one who is to fulfill my promise to David. It will reveal who the Messiah is, who the Son of David is, who the one is that's supposed to sit on the throne of God's kingdom for all eternity. When you see this sign, you will know this is the one who will fulfill the Davidic covenant. And he's the one that will establish the new covenant that Jeremiah and even Isaiah and Ezekiel prophesy. But we normally go to Jeremiah because he goes more in depth on it.